everybody. It's Pastor Anthony here. We're going to be reading chapter 5 from The Biggest Story by Kevin DeYoung. If you have watched the previous videos, you know that God has made everybody. He has made promises to his people. He has been protecting them, and he has been rescuing them when they've been in trouble. In fact, we saw last time how God brought them out of slavery with his great power. So now we're going to see what happens when it is just God and his people and him providing for them, caring for them, and speaking to them. So let's read together chapter 5. Awesome.
It was a very good thing God was always rescuing his people, because it seemed that no matter how many times God saved his people, the Israelites were never quite safe from themselves. See, after God delivered his people from Egypt, he gave them a lot of commandments. This wasn't to punish them, but to help and protect them. You guys know who that guy is right there? That's Moses, right? With the 10 Commandments. They were good commandments, and if they obeyed the commandments, God's people would be blessed. There would be food and children and long life and protection and a new home. It would be just like they were in paradise again. That's where God wanted to lead them all along, back to the garden. But if they didn't obey, there would be curses, just like the ones that fell on Adam and Eve and the serpent. As you might have guessed, the people didn't do so well obeying God's commands, and after Moses and his helper Joshua died, they disobeyed even more. They ignored the most important commands, and when they did work hard at some rules, like getting their sacrifices right, they didn't really obey those rules from the heart. They just checked them off their list and forgot about the more important commands. Not that God's people deserved it, but God finally gave them their promised land. God did the work to get them in, but God's people didn't do the work to drive everyone else out. This caused a lot of trouble for the Israelites. They constantly had enemies to fight, and worse, they constantly had to fight the temptation to be just like their enemies. Sometimes things would go well for Israel, when they had a good leader or when they obeyed, but most often things went poorly. God gave the Israelites rules, but they didn't obey them. God made his dwelling among them, but they didn't act like they wanted him to stick around. God sent prophets, but Israel didn't listen. God provided priests, but the priests didn't know how to be holy. Later, God gave them kings, but the kings were a royal pain. Israel was a mess. Of course, God still had his promises to keep, but most days it was hard to imagine how anyone could save this stubborn people. It would have been even harder to imagine how the promised man could come from among this people.
Wow, that was kind of a sad chapter, wasn't it? God had saved his people. He had given them a new land to live with him and be with him. And then he had given them some commands, some directions, so how they can know him and love him and follow him. But they didn't want to listen. They didn't want to hear his commands or listen to his voice or do what he asked. Have you ever realized before that God's commands, the directions he gives us from his word, are actually for our good? They're to protect us, to bless us, to watch over us. Can you think of any of the commands God's given you? Maybe you can think of at least 10. Why don't you ask Mommy and Daddy to help you find that in the Bible? All right, love you guys, miss you, and Lord willing, we'll see you again soon.